I moved into my apartment 6 months ago. It's an old building, one of those pre-war ones. The high ceilings and thin walls amplify every little noise, turning footsteps into a soft rhythm. The apartment was more appealing in the photos, but the rent was workable if I shared it. After a week of browsing listings and watching cheerful realtors, I was done with the search. So, I signed the lease. I found my roommate on a classified site. I'll refer to him as Mark. Like me, he was in his 20s and polite in our messages. When he arrived to see the apartment, he wore a clean hoodie and held a folder with copies of his ID and references. Somehow, that comforted me. People who come prepared tend not to cause problems, I reassured myself. We chose a day for him to move in. Right then, he Venmo'd his portion of the deposit. Soon after, our living room transformed into a labyrinth of cardboard boxes and mismatched thrifted furniture. The initial nights became a blur of assembling furniture and empty pizza boxes. Mark worked evenings and some weekends, making it feel more like we were neighbors than friends. I didn't mind, I craved tranquility. The apartment had a quirky layout that made sense only when you were inside it. The front door led directly into the living room, with a hallway extending past a bathroom to 2 side-by-side bedrooms. My bedroom was at the end, with a window overlooking the alley and a bed squeezed between the radiator and the far wall. There wasn't room for storage beneath it, but there was enough space to cast a shadow. At first, nothing felt amiss. The nights were mostly quiet. Any sounds I heard were from the building itself, pipes groaning, someone in 3B chuckling at a late-night show, and the elevator cables whining like they owed a debt. The first strange occurrence seemed minor. One morning, I discovered my bedroom door ajar. I always shut it before sleeping, even during summer. It's a habit that feels like a ritual. I reasoned I must have forgotten. That night, I pushed it shut again and reminded myself to be more cautious. Days later, I noticed my phone charger didn't look right. I typically kept it coiled a certain way, but that morning, it was reversed. It was insignificant yet frustrating. I uncoiled it, set it back, and inwardly chastised myself for caring. Another time, I returned home to find a glass of water on my nightstand. I never take drinks into the bedroom. Water rings on would always irritate me. I brought the glass to the kitchen and casually asked Mark if he had left it. He shook his head, barely glancing up from his bowl of noodles. We were both exhausted, so I let it go. This continued for weeks, little, explainable things that felt just off. Occasionally, I'd wake at night, convinced I heard a door latch. I'd lie still, convincing myself it was just a neighbor, the airflow, or the building settling. There was one night, around 2, when I swore I heard a soft exhale nearby, a sound that felt too close, like someone was trying to stay silent. I got out of bed, checked the living room, the bathroom, and locked the front door twice, once with my hand and once with my eyes. Everything was just as it should be. I tucked those moments into a mental drawer and closed it. Sharing living space means grappling with the uncertainty of where your life ends and another's begins. Their routines press against yours, their quirks gently nudge your own. If something feels off, you often think the fault is yours. So, I adapted. Mark was a breeze to live with, almost too easy. He never left dirty dishes. Visits from friends were non-existent. By accident, I learned his schedule, the soft click when he left, the steady rhythm of the shower upon his return, and how he always washed the bowl right after his late-night meals, as if the food didn't count unless the dish was clean. We managed a few conversations that barely scratched the surface. Just small talk about work and the weather. He laughed at a video I shared once, but then seemed to regret it and retreated to his room. I kept telling myself I appreciated the privacy. It felt polite, as big city dwellers often are by minding their own business. The Friday when everything went awry began like any long week's end, feeling unproductive. I arrived home around 9, too late to cook. I scrolled my phone on the couch until my eyes burned, then resolved to sleep early this time. The apartment lay still, Mark's door was closed, and a faint light glowed beneath it, like an unspoken thought. I brushed my teeth and washed my face, performing the little rituals that made the place feel like home. Before turning off my bedside lamp, I stood and gently pushed my bedroom door shut, feeling the latch catch. I checked the window lock, just as a precaution, even though no one in our building climbs fire escapes except for delivery workers. Then, I climbed into bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin, letting the radiator's rhythmic ticking soothe me to sleep. Somewhat after midnight, I drifted into a light sleep. You know the state, vaguely aware of the pillow beneath your cheek, but still floating. Suddenly, I woke, as if someone had flipped a switch. The room was dark, the alley light cast a faint rectangle on the wall. Nothing appeared to be different, but my skin tingled, as if someone were watching me from a doorway, their eyes on me before I even turned. I held my breath and listened. Old buildings have their sounds, familiar if you know them well. The radiator ticked, the building sighed, and in the distance, an elevator thudded. Then I heard it, soft fabric brushing against wood, very close, but not from the hallway or the living room. It was coming from the floor, from beneath my bed. My body froze, except for my heart, which thudded loudly. Motionless, without a cough or a swallow, I waited with that feral stillness that appears when you're convinced you're a deer in tall grass. Again, the sound, the slow shift of weight, cloth against floorboards. I turned my head slightly, staring into the shadowy gap between the frame and the floor, just a darker shade of black. I told myself I must be imagining it. The mind plays tricks, projecting fears where there's nothing. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, moving through thick air, and let its light illuminate my face. The clock read 3 a.m. I opened the camera, my thumb trembling, and pointed it into the darkness below my bed. For a heartbeat, the camera captured nothing. Then, as it adjusted, a pale shape emerged from the dark: skin, a forehead, the bridge of a nose. Two wide, glassy eyes stared up at me through the phone screen, as if the lens served as a peephole. I nearly dropped the phone, biting my cheek hard enough to taste blood. I yanked it back, as if the eyes might leap through. I couldn't scream, my mouth felt locked tight. I set the phone face down and squeezed my eyes shut, thinking maybe ignorance would help. I opened them again because the darkness felt worse and leaned over the edge of the bed for a better view, as if looking directly would make it more real. Two eyes faced me. They blinked not, they didn't move. It was Mark. There was no mistaking what I saw: the outline of his face, the disheveled hair, the thin whites of his eyes shadowed, shoulders hunched, fitting into a space made for no one. We remained locked in silence, studying one another. My pulse pounded. In those lingering seconds, a barrage of thoughts rushed by without resolution. What was he doing? How long had he been there? Did he watch me while I slept? How many nights had I never noticed? How often had I closed the door, blaming the air for moving it? When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, like creaky hinges. "I couldn't sleep," he whispered. That was it. No apologies, no explanations, just a fragile line of words tethered to nothing meaningful. My voice felt foreign, untrustworthy. I sat up, pressing my back against the headboard and staring at the door, the handle out of reach without stepping onto the floor he occupied. The room became too small, it felt claustrophobic. The radiator clicked, somewhere, a pipe knocked, as if a neighbor had tapped it with a wedding ring. Mark began to move. The sound of his clothes against the floor grated on me, like an insect trapped beneath glass. He wriggled toward the edge of the bed, getting out his shoulders first, then his chest, followed by his hips and legs. Dust clung to his hair, his hoodie looked tarnished. He rose gradually, angling his body slightly away, a posture reminiscent of someone trying to minimize themselves in public. We didn't exchange words. He brushed his sleeve with a purposeful gesture, more for himself than me. Then, he walked to the door and exited my room, softly clicking it shut behind him. I heard his footsteps fade in the hallway, followed by the soft creak of his bedroom door. I remained still, arms wrapped around my knees, phone clasped like a tool I didn't know how to wield. Eventually, the numbness faded enough to allow clarity to ensue. I reached for the lamp and switched it on. The room looked unchanged, which felt somehow insulting. I didn't sleep again. I fixated on the door until the alley light on the wall shifted to a gray, then white hue as morning approached. At 7, I got up, opened my door, and stepped into the hallway with the carefulness one reserves for museums or hospitals. The air was tinged with dust and dish soap. Mark's door remained shut. I made coffee despite my shaking hands, burning my tongue for my impatience. At 8, I knocked on Mark's door. No answer. I knocked again, more firmly this time, calling his name. The silence felt orchestrated. I turned the knob, pushing the door open. The room was vacant. It wasn't just empty of Mark, it bore the emptiness of a space erased from memory. No clothes hung, no books piled, no laptop, and no toothbrush in its usual cup. The closet stood open, the rod barren. Only slight indentations in the carpet and a dust shadow on the wall hinted that anyone had ever lived there. On the kitchen counter rested his spare key, the one the landlord had provided upon his arrival, perched on a paper towel like an exhibit of absence. No note awaited me. No text, no sounds in the hallway, no thud of departing boxes. Sometime between 3 a.m. and sunrise, he had vanished, leaving with a practiced efficiency. That afternoon, I changed the lock on the front door. The hardware store clerk asked if I needed help choosing, but I declined in a tone that discouraged further questions. I installed the deadbolt myself because it felt significant to fortify my own space. That night, I lay in bed, all lights off, senses heightened to discomfort, staring at the ceiling. Sleep eluded me. The days that followed felt like taking long, shallow breaths. I went to work, returning home, and opened my bedroom door with that tedious, absurd trepidation that loops until you deliberately cut through it. Each night, I checked under my bed using my phone's light, sweeping the beam slowly until it reached the opposite wall and back. I began to wear headphones less often. The apartment seemed more comforting with its creaks and sighs. I hung a bell on the bedroom doorknob for a week, then removed it, feeling as though I were living with a cat teaching me. When I finally confided in a friend, she gasped, hand over her mouth, urging, "Oh my God. Call the police." I didn't, not then. The event had occurred, and the individual had departed. I had a photo, captured when I held my phone over the edge of the bed, eyes alight like wild creatures in a field. I deleted it later that day, then wrestled with self-doubt for a week. Evidence only belongs to crimes. I had merely uncovered a void in my life's map of trust. But I did learn a few truths. I discovered that it's possible to inhabit a space alongside someone without ever truly seeing their essence. Silence can become a practiced art. Some people manage to extricate themselves from a place so thoroughly that you begin to doubt they ever existed at all. If you're waiting for an answer, I don't possess one. Perhaps a reasonable explanation lay entwined with something much less rational. Insomnia tangled with fixation, curiosity linked with a profound sense of emptiness. Maybe, on nights I didn't rouse, he had slept beneath my bed, when the door was ajar, and I had told myself the air moved it. Maybe the glass near my bed had belonged to him. Maybe the reverse charger coil represented a signature meant only for him to decipher. What I know is straightforward. At 3 in the morning, I peered under my bed, guided by my phone and trepidation, and found another human being where only dust and lost socks should have dwelled. He stared at me, and I at him, before he left, and then departed again, this time for good. Months later, I still check. I shine the light beneath the bed, watching it transform the floor into something pale and ordinary. I keep my bedroom door closed because rituals matter, and I sleep to the ticking radiator serving as a metronome because clocks may deceive, but metal remains honest. Sometimes, I awaken for no reason, lying still to listen. What I hear is the building, the pipes, neighbors, and an elevator cable reluctant to embrace winter. And that is enough. If you take away one thing from this, let it be practical. Lock your door. Keep track of your keys. Pay attention to the subtle changes in your environment. A misplaced glass, a charger coiled differently. You don't have to succumb to paranoia to remain alert. You need not lie awake with one eye open to claim ownership of both of them. I find myself thinking about Mark occasionally, in that neutral, weary way we reflect on people who almost became part of our lives. Perhaps he relocated across town. Maybe he narrates a version of this tale where nothing seems out of place, convincing himself that acknowledging it would make it real. Or perhaps he simply never thinks about it again. Now, when I turn off the light, I pause before settling in. I allow the room to adjust around me, listening for the mundane noises that belong to the night and not only to fear. Then, I fall asleep most nights, because even stories without clear explanations eventually rest, and the body craves fulfillment. Yet, every night, I still check.